show you how to merge images to create a panorama. So we're going to start by going to File, Automate, Photo Merge. And that's going to let you choose the files that you want. So I'm going to just click on Browse, and I go to the folder that I want for, that I have the images in for this project. And we're going to go here, and I want these images here, and I placed them here, so I already know these are the ones I want. Say OK. And these are raw files. So we want to do this merge process before you begin to edit your files. So I usually choose perspective because typically when I'm doing a panorama, it's for a landscape, and it's this one in the background that we're going to do. So I'm going to choose perspective. It's going to blend the images together. I don't do vignette removal. I don't usually have an issue with that. You could do distortion corrections. Usually I'll leave these off, and if it really doesn't look good when I'm done, then I'll go back and remerge it. I also don't do the content aware fill at this point. It would fill in like the corners. I'll do that manually afterwards. So we'll say OK. And it's going to take a few minutes, especially since they're raw files. And you'll see them loading. And it's going to bring them all into one file, and then it's going to automatically mask the areas that it thinks it needs to create the panorama. So you have to have a little patience. I also have lots of images here. I think I have 7. So you can see them beginning to load. Now it's blending them. Video a little bit. And there we go. So you can kind of see where they've merged, and usually you don't get that shadow there, but we can adjust that if needed. Usually it does a pretty good job. And when you zoom in closer, you can see it's not really there. Just when it's really small, you're kind of seeing where it's selected the pieces of the image, and you can see how it's masked each layer. So this is where the perspective comes into play. So it's done a good job of making my image look the way it really looked. You can always adjust things if you think it didn't come out very well. Like if we look at this image, it may have stretched that side just a little bit. We can go back and look at your image, your original image, and see if you need to fine tune that more. Or again, you can always try a different blending or merging mode. So we'll work with this one for now, just so you can see what I'm going to do. And I may actually crop a little bit of this very dark side here. And then I'll do some fill up top. So it actually does look like it's stretched a little bit. So I'm going to try a different mode. So let's leave this one open, and let's just go back and try another one, and we'll compare the two. So we'll do our photo merge again. I'm going to leave it on auto this time, and we'll browse for those images and select them again and say OK. Well, it may not have stretched it. That tree does have a little bit of an extended side on that right-hand side there. But we'll see what this one looks like and see if it looks any different. It's always good to try things more than one time and see what works best. Nothing's fail-safe. And there you have it. So we have this one and this one. Looks pretty much the same. So it did a pretty good job, I guess, on both of them. And again, when you zoom in, you really don't see that merge there. And once we flatten the layers, once we're done, with it, if that shows up, you could always do a healing brush, but I don't think that it will. So I think I'm going to go with, let's zoom in. Might as well go with this one. This looks fine. So now I want to decide how I want to crop it and what I want to fill in. So we can try filling it in first. And I'm just going to use my lasso tool, and I'm going to come around this area. And you want to give it some area to read. So you don't want to go right to the edges. You want it to know what it's trying to fill in with. And I'm going to use the generative fill. And I'm not going to type anything here. I'm just going to hit generate. And that's going to give me 3 options. And this process also takes a few seconds. And that actually looks really good. So I can move this over a little bit. I think that looks really good, and it makes the clouds, flow nicely. So I'm just going to close that. And there's our new sky. And then we can fill in the bottom the same way. And we'll select the bottom, do the generative fill, and generate. And this one's got a little more to do down here. It's got a rock over here and then trees over here. So we'll see how this one comes out. Okay, so this one put rocks mostly down here. Let's see what the next one is. That looks better, I think. It has the trees here with just the rock on that side. And this one's completely different. I think I like the second one. That looks the most realistic. So we'll go ahead and close this. And if you want to save some space when you're, in your file size, you can delete the ones that you don't want from this box, and that will just leave the one that we're going to use. Okay, so that has filled in our top and bottom. I'm not worried about the sides because I'm going to crop this a little bit anyway. So you can save this as a layered file first in case you want to come back and make changes, which is what I typically do. I'll save it as a TIFF file. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and flatten this. Go layer, flatten. And we can also see how big this is because it's probably a pretty large image. So image size. Yeah, it's 27 inches tall by 43 inches wide. So I'm going to crop it first and then we'll reduce it down a little bit. So let's do our crop tool. And you can crop to a particular size if you're planning to print this. I've done canvases of landscapes. I did one from Sedona that was 12 inches by 36 inches, so I cropped it to that proportion. So I'm not going to crop this a whole lot now in case I want to do something different with it later. And I think I like the bottom just the way it is. And we'll say OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and resize this a bit. You want to leave it at your 300, and I'm going to size this down to let's see what 21 inches gives us. Yeah, 13 by 21. So if we did 12 here, that would give me a 12 by 18. That would be a good size print. So I think I'm going to size that and leave it at that size. And you can always size it bigger and then bring it down smaller later on. Now, of course, like I said, these were raw files. So now I would go into Camera Raw and go to my filter, Camera Raw filter, and do my corrections. And I'm going to bring up the exposure just a tad, add some contrast, bring down the highlights a little bit, bring up my shadows so we get some of that detail down here in the trees in the front. And you can always tweak these. And then when I do the whites and blacks, I'm going to hold my Alt key option on a Mac. And you want to bring this just so that you're starting to see a little bit of color on the spot on here. And sometimes the whites get too bright anyway, so I may adjust that. And then the blacks, we have lots of yellow there showing, so I'm going to bring this up some to make the blacks not quite so black. Let's try there. And I might bring those highlights down just a little bit more. And it was a very bright day, and there was fog over here, so this is going to be a brighter area of the photo. Then I want to bring in some texture and some clarity, and that will help sharpen up your photo a little bit, and maybe just a touch of vibrance. And that looks pretty good. And I'm going to say, okay, the other thing you could check is your, if you wanted to add some noise reduction and sharpening, you could do that under detail. Let me do a little noise reduction. I think it looks pretty sharp, so I'm not going to add any more there. Do a little color noise. And optics, if you think there's any distortion from your camera, you can adjust those here. I don't want to do a vignette, so we're going to just say okay. And there's our edited photo. And usually I do duplicate the background layer. I didn't in this case, but that's okay. And that would be our finished image. So I would go ahead and save that as either a TIFF or a JPEG. We don't have layers now, so either way is okay. And that would be almost ready for printing. I could just crop a little more to fit, the 12 by 18, and it would be ready to go. Hope that gives you some tips on merging for a panorama. Talk to you soon.